Breaking. China just pulled the plug on a critical lifeline to the U.S. auto industry, and no one's talking about it. While headlines focus on EV sales and shiny new Teslas, a silent crisis is brewing behind the scenes. China controls over 70% of the world's rare earth supply, and they've just slammed the brakes on exports to the U.S. These are the minerals that power electric motors, batteries, and every piece of tech inside your favorite EV. And without them, America's clean energy future hits a wall. What happens next could cripple production, spike prices, and send shockwaves across the entire economy. So, why did China do it? How bad is the situation? And can the U.S. survive an EV blackout? Stick around, because what you're about to hear might be the real reason your next car is delayed, downgraded, or dead in the water. It started quietly, a policy change buried deep in China's latest export regulations. No dramatic press conference, no fiery political statements, just a line of legalese that sent shockwaves through the global automotive industry. On the surface, it seemed like just another diplomatic scuffle between two economic giants. But in reality, it was a strategic strike, one that could unravel the future of America's electric vehicle ambitions. China has just tightened restrictions on the export of rare earth elements to the United States, the essential minerals that power everything from EV batteries to electric motors, infotainment systems, and even advanced driver assist features. These aren't just fancy components. They're the beating heart of every electric vehicle on the road today. And here's the terrifying part. China controls more than 70% of the global rare earth supply and over 85% of the rare earth refining capacity. Without access to these materials, America's EV production isn't just slowed down, it's paralyzed. Let's put this into perspective. Neodymium, dysprosium, praseodymium, and terbium. These rare earth elements might sound like something out of a sci-fi novel, but they're the very reason your EV motor turns, your battery holds a charge, and your touchscreen lights up. And as of this month, U.S. automakers are scrambling to secure alternative sources. Ford, General Motors, Tesla all have sounded the alarm. Suppliers are issuing emergency calls to Washington. Lobbyists are begging the Biden administration to intervene. But the damage may already be underway. And it's not just about car makers. If these materials stop flowing, costs will skyrocket across the supply chain. Battery prices will surge. Production timelines will be delayed. Vehicle prices could spike by thousands of dollars. Not because of inflation, but because the parts simply don't exist anymore. This isn't a long-term risk. This is a short-term reality. And it's not just about EVs either. These materials also power wind turbines, smartphones, military hardware, and yes, even the guidance systems in fighter jets. The stakes aren't just economic, they're geopolitical. So, why is China doing this now? Some experts say it's retaliation for recent U.S. tariffs on Chinese steel and aluminum. Others believe it's a calculated move to slow down America's green energy transition and give Chinese automakers, like BYD and NIO, a head start in global EV dominance. And honestly, it could be both. This is economic warfare in the 21st century, where the battlefield isn't land or sea. It's supply chains and strategic minerals. And here's the kicker. The U.S. knew this was coming. For over a decade, national security experts have warned that America's dependence on Chinese rare earths was a ticking time bomb. But mining projects in the U.S. faced regulatory delays, environmental pushback, and a lack of investment. Now we're paying the price for years of inaction. So what happens next? Can the U.S. build up domestic mining and processing fast enough to survive this squeeze? Can it form alliances with countries like Australia, Canada, or Brazil to source critical materials? Or will this be the moment that America's electric future stalls out before it truly begins? One thing is certain, this is no longer just about cars. It's about national security, economic independence, and the global balance of technological power. China just made a move, a quiet but devastating one. Now the world is watching to see how the United States responds. This isn't just a supply chain hiccup. This is China's power play, and it just might cripple the U.S. EV industry. Just a few months ago, America's EV future seemed unstoppable. Government subsidies were flowing. Tesla's stock was surging. Legacy automakers like Ford and GM were announcing billion-dollar battery plants seemingly every week. It felt like the U.S. had finally caught up to the electric revolution, ready to compete, innovate, and dominate. But now, all that momentum is teetering on the edge. This rare earth export ban by China, it isn't just a trade dispute. It's a silent strike at the foundation of America's most hyped industry. And the worst part? Most Americans still have no idea how deep this crisis goes. The average EV takes anywhere from 10 to 15 kilograms of rare earth metals to function properly. Multiply that across millions of vehicles, and suddenly you realize the entire ecosystem, from gigafactories in Nevada to EV startups in Michigan, is being held hostage by a single point of failure. One country, one export policy, total global dependency. And it's not just a shortage of raw materials. It's a chokehold on refining and processing, too. Even if the U.S. were to mine more rare earths domestically, like at the Mountain Pass facility in California, the ores would still need to be sent to China for refinement. That's how deeply entrenched this monopoly is. America's EV dream doesn't just rely on access to the ground. It relies on Chinese furnaces and factories. And those doors are closing. We're already seeing the ripple effects. Several EV manufacturers have quietly paused upcoming production lines. Others are reevaluating their model rollouts for 2026 and beyond. One major U.S. supplier just issued a warning. Unless new materials are sourced within 90 days, critical component deliveries will stop. This isn't theoretical. This is real-world collapse in slow motion. Meanwhile, Chinese automakers like BYD are sitting pretty. With guaranteed access to raw materials and strong domestic backing, they're preparing to flood global markets with low-cost, fully equipped EVs, just as Western brands are hitting the brakes. It's the perfect economic ambush. Take out the competition's supply lines while boosting your own production. Strategic? Absolutely. Ruthless? Without a doubt. And while automakers scramble for answers, Washington is playing catch-up. Emergency funding proposals are being floated. There's talk of fast-tracking mining permits and launching rare earth partnerships with allies. But those fixes take time, years in fact, and the EV market moves in months. Even worse, consumer confidence is beginning to waver. Rising prices, delivery delays, and reduced EV tax credits are creating a perfect storm of buyer hesitation. The promise of cheap, accessible, American-made electric vehicles is fading, replaced by headlines of scarcity and geopolitical tension. And if this trend continues, the industry could hit a wall even harder than it did during the chip shortage of 2021. This isn't just an EV issue. It's a warning that innovation without infrastructure is just ambition. That building the future requires more than funding. It requires foresight. And that betting your national progress on another nation's mercy is a dangerous game. So yes, America's EV dream has been bruised. But whether it gets crushed entirely will depend on what happens next, in boardrooms, in factories, and in the halls of Congress. Because make no mistake, China's silent strike is no longer silent. The alarm has been sounded, and the question now is, will America answer the call before it's too late? What we're witnessing right now isn't just a trade war. It's an engineered blackout, and the fuse has already been lit. As Chinese rare earth exports grind to a halt, factories across the U.S. are starting to dim their lights. Assembly lines are slowing. Deliveries are delayed. Critical components are vanishing from inventories. And still, the public barely understands what's happening behind the scenes. Why? Because this isn't the kind of crisis that explodes overnight. This is the kind that creeps, then crashes. Silent, strategic, devastating. This is the EV blackout, and it has officially begun. Across the industry, the signs are unmistakable. EV startups that once promised revolution are now facing insolvency. Battery manufacturers are scrambling to re-engineer products using lower-grade materials. Automakers are quietly cutting features from upcoming models, removing performance motors and regenerative braking systems just to conserve precious rare earths. Some suppliers are even turning to second-hand materials, harvesting components from scrap vehicles just to meet quotas. One supplier, who asked to remain anonymous, revealed that they've gone from a 90-day inventory buffer to just 3 weeks. After that, production stops. Period. Tesla, Ford, GM, they're all caught in the same web. Not even Elon Musk can innovate his way around a supply chain that no longer exists. In fact, sources suggest that Tesla's next-generation Model 2, once expected to hit mass production in 2025, could be delayed indefinitely due to motor shortages stemming directly from the embargo. That affordable $25,000 EV the world was waiting for? It might not happen, at least not here. Meanwhile, Chinese automakers are moving into the vacuum. With full access to domestic rare earth supply and vertically integrated manufacturing, they're now exporting fully loaded EVs to global markets, including the US. And with lower costs and faster production, their vehicles are starting to undercut American competitors by thousands of dollars. This isn't just competition, it's a market invasion. But let's zoom out. Why is China doing this? Some say it's retaliation, a response to US tariffs, semiconductor bans, or rising military tension in the South China Sea. But others believe this is something far more calculated, a long-term strategy to dominate not just the EV market, but the entire global clean energy economy. Because rare earths aren't just for cars. They power wind turbines, solar inverters, grid-scale batteries. Whoever controls them doesn't just make the rules, they become the future. And here's where things get dangerous. This blackout doesn't just hit the economy. It hits energy independence. It hits climate goals. It even hits national defense. Rare earths are used in everything from drones to guided missiles. So as the EV industry flickers, America is facing a much darker reality. A future where its technological infrastructure depends entirely on the whims of a foreign power. And while lawmakers argue over budget allocations and corporate CEOs scramble to secure contracts with Australian or Canadian miners, the blackout grows. Slowly, quietly, relentlessly. This is no longer a warning. This is the exposure of just how fragile our transition to electric really is. Not because of innovation or policy or public support, but because of a single point of failure that's been ignored for too long. The EV blackout has begun. And if the US doesn't act decisively and immediately, it won't be just electric vehicles that go dark. The headlines still don't say it outright. The press calls it a supply chain disruption, a material shortage, or a shift in global trade dynamics. But let's be honest, that's just diplomatic smoke. What's happening right now is a hidden war, and the battleground is the rare earth supply chain. It's not fought with tanks or missiles. It's fought with contracts, regulations, and strategic embargoes. But make no mistake, the stakes are just as high. At the center of this war, the future of the US electric vehicle industry, now standing on the edge of collapse. For decades, America outsourced the messy, toxic, and politically unpopular parts of the clean energy revolution. The mining, the refining, the environmental risks. While the US invested in sleek EV startups and climate-friendly marketing, China built a global empire of mineral dominance. Today, it controls the lion's share of neodymium, dysprosium, and praseodymium, the building blocks of EV motors and magnets. And now, Beijing has weaponized that control. This isn't random. It's not a spontaneous trade decision. It's a long-game strategy that's been quietly executed for over 20 years. China has cornered the market, pushed competitors out of business, and bought up overseas mines through state-backed companies. And now, with just one export restriction, it can stop the engine of America's electric future, literally. What does that war look like in real time? It looks like Ford halting the rollout of its next-generation electric F-150 because it can't secure enough rare earth magnets. It looks like GM scaling back its EV production targets for 2026 due to material volatility. It looks like Rivian and Lucid struggling to stay afloat, while Wall Street turns skeptical about the entire American EV sector. Behind closed doors, Pentagon officials are holding emergency briefings. Why? Because these same rare earths don't just power cars. They power advanced fighter jets, guided missiles, and radar systems. A cut to civilian EV supply is just the beginning. The military is next, and Washington knows it. And while this unfolds, China is playing offense. Its top EV makers, BYD, NIO, XPeng, are ramping up exports. These are knockoff cars anymore. They're high-tech, affordable, and increasingly competitive. And thanks to rare earth access, they're immune to the shortages devastating Western automakers. Europe is already flooded with them. The US could be next. And once Chinese EVs take root in global markets, it may be impossible for US brands to catch up. In response, American officials are scrambling to forge alliances. New mining deals with Australia, refining agreements with Canada, emergency permits for rare earth mines in Texas and California. But all of this takes time, and that's the one resource this industry no longer has. Because once trust is broken in a supply chain, once deliveries start to fail and promises get delayed, it's nearly impossible to rebuild quickly. Consumers lose patience. Investors pull back. Competitors surge ahead. And for the US EV industry, that clock is already ticking. So yes, this is a hidden war, but it's no less dangerous. It's a war over who controls the next century of transportation, technology, and energy. A war fought with materials more valuable than oil and far more scarce. And as America faces the consequences of its dependence, the illusion of self-sufficiency is falling apart. The U.S. EV industry is not just under pressure. It's on the brink. And if bold action isn't taken now, not tomorrow, not next year, but now, this hidden war might end before most people even knew it began. The giants of American industry are stumbling. Tesla, once the unchallenged king of electric innovation, is quietly delaying production goals. Ford, fresh off its multi-billion-dollar EV pivot, is pausing expansion plans. And GM, the company that boldly claimed it would go all-electric by 2035, is now trimming EV targets and rebalancing its portfolio. One by one, the titans are blinking. Not because of demand, not because of tech, but because someone just reached into the control panel of the global EV industry and flipped the kill switch. That someone is China. And the kill switch? Rare earth elements. This isn't some abstract macroeconomic event. This is real, right now. The sudden restriction on rare earth exports by China is cutting off the oxygen supply to America's EV industry. These critical materials, once easily sourced through international suppliers, are now bottlenecked behind a geopolitical wall. A wall that Tesla, GM, and Ford can't climb without a miracle. Let's be crystal clear. Without rare earths like neodymium and dysprosium, you cannot build high-efficiency electric motors. Without lanthanum and praseodymium, you cannot make the magnets that drive torque and range in EVs. Without these metals, you can throw your billion-dollar battery plants, your supercharger networks, and your glossy advertising campaigns straight out the window. And that's exactly what's starting to happen. At Tesla's Gigafactory in Texas, sources report that procurement teams are scrambling for alternative suppliers, even considering radical redesigns of motor systems just to bypass the need for restricted materials. Ford is halting upgrades to its EV supply lines, and executives are now prioritizing hybrid models again, a move that seemed unthinkable just 18 months ago. And GM is facing pressure from shareholders after quietly postponing the launch of its highly anticipated Silverado EV, citing global material volatility. It's not just an inconvenience. It's an existential threat. And here's the kicker. China didn't even need to raise tariffs. It didn't have to ban exports completely. All it did was tighten licensing requirements, delay shipments, and implement vague environmental audits on its own producers. Enough to grind the pipeline to a crawl. Just a small twist of the dial. That's the power they hold. That's the precision of the kill switch. Meanwhile, Chinese automakers are accelerating hard. With full access to domestic rare earths and a vertically integrated supply chain, companies like BYD are scaling faster than ever. They're already outpacing Tesla in global unit sales and pushing aggressively into Europe, South America, and Southeast Asia. And with Western brands stuck in slow motion, it's not a matter of if they reach the US, but when. What's most alarming? This was predictable. Industry insiders and geopolitical analysts have been warning about this vulnerability for over a decade. The US once had rare earth production. It had refining capacity, but it let it rot, sold it off, outsourced it, regulated it into the ground. And now, as the most important economic transformation in a century hangs in the balance, the nation is realizing just how fragile its foundation really is. This isn't just a crisis for Tesla, GM, and Ford. It's a reckoning for American industrial policy. Because what good is a trillion-dollar EV revolution if you don't control the raw materials? What good are climate goals and electrification targets if the motors don't turn and the batteries don't charge? The EV dream was built on vision, innovation, and momentum. But it turns out it also depended on something far less glamorous: access. And now that access is gone, China just hit the kill switch. And unless the US rewires the entire system from the ground up, the lights might not come back on. The lights are flickering across America's auto industry. Not from lack of demand, not from weak innovation, but from a silent war no one voted for, and few even noticed until it was too late. This isn't just about electric vehicles. This is about national sovereignty, about the future of American manufacturing, about whether the next industrial revolution will be led from Detroit or dictated from Beijing. We stood at the edge of greatness, and built our foundation on sand. Now, the world's largest economies are entering a race where the prize isn't just market share. It's control over energy, transportation, and technological destiny. So the question isn't just, can we fix this? The real question is, will we act before the engine dies completely? Or will America's EV future be remembered as a dream that stalled before it even started? If you found this video eye-opening, hit that like button to break the silence, subscribe to stay ahead of the truth, and drop a comment below. Do you think the US can recover from this rare earth crisis? Or has China already won the EV war? The blackout has begun. Let's make sure it doesn't become permanent.